Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Celeste and this is Celeste Creates, and I'm going to call this QuiltyTube 5.5. It's part tutorial, but more of just an informational session. What I wanted to do today was talk with you for a little bit about some of my thoughts on what I think are some of the essentials for quilting and getting started in quilting. I know there's a lot of products out there. I know in the years that I've been quilting and sewing, things have just exploded, and it's a lot of fun to see all the products out there and the gadgets and things, but at the same time it can be a little bit overwhelming. And so while I love all the gadgets and all the fun stuff, I wouldn't call myself a minimalist, but I really I don't have tons and tons of money to spend on quilting tools and accessories, and I would rather buy fabric to make the quilts with than spend the money that I have available on fancy gadgets that maybe I don't need. So not to say you can't go out and buy those and enjoy them, but I thought, especially if you're new to quilting or you're really kind of wanting to get started in quilting, I just wanted to share with you what I felt like are the essentials to get you started, and that you can make just about any quilt if you have these tools. And so that's kind of what I want to go over today. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Celeste. A little bit about myself. I have been quilting for about 20 years now. My mom taught me to sew when I was younger. And she was a beautiful seamstress, made a lot of clothes, and made clothes for us growing up, made my sister's wedding dress, a lot of, she was just a beautiful seamstress. And I did a few things when I was younger, and I just never really stuck with it and didn't enjoy it, and really wasn't into making myself clothes, especially as the fashions were changing as I was a young teenager and growing up. I didn't do much sewing for myself. And so I really didn't pick up sewing until after we were married. So when my oldest son, who's almost 21, was probably about 9 months old, I got my first sewing machine for my birthday, and I made my first quilt. And I've never taken a quilting class in person. We have multiple quilt shops, but I've never taken a class. So this, I guess, was even back before the days of YouTube and all the tutorials out there that we have available to us today. And I'm pretty sure I got a book at the library and kind of taught myself how to quilt based on what I already knew from learning some basic sewing with my mom. But honestly, I hadn't done that much. I had never put in a zipper. Of course, you don't need that for quilting, but it wasn't very advanced. So I knew I could sew a straight line, and so I kind of checked out the book. I remember reading about how to bind a quilt. For years, I bound a quilt using the method I'd found in this book until I, did some more research and learned some other ways. But I taught myself that way and got me a pattern or two and bought some fabric and got started. And so I've been quilting for 20 years, and I've made hundreds of quilts. Some that I've sold, many that I've given away. I probably actually have sold more than I think. And many that grace our home. So, yeah, hundreds of quilts, lots of mini quilts, but lots and lots of larger quilts too. So, and I've just learned as I've gone along. And of course now, like I said, you got YouTube, but I remember even before YouTube got really big as far as tutorials, I would look on blog posts and things like that and find things that I could do. And so it was out there. I learned how to pin a quilt, piece pin, taught myself how to free motion quilt on my home machine, and so I've been doing this for a while now, and I still love it. I've taken up cross stitch within the last year and a half to, I guess it'll almost be 2 years this fall, and have gotten back into enjoying that. But quilting, is still my first love. So anyway, that's a little bit about me and kind of my experience. You can kind of you know, see if you've watched me before, you're pretty familiar with my fabric stash over here. There's some more stash over there, and so I just love making quilts. I love piecing the tops, but I really love putting it together and having a finished product as well. And it's one of my favorite things to see my family in the evenings on the sofa. Either, you know, maybe we're doing family prayers or we're watching a movie and everybody's curled up with a quilt. So we make them, we use them, and I just want to pass on maybe a little bit of what I've learned over these last 20 years. Okay, so we've changed our view here a little bit. So I kind of wanted to start with the first piece of equipment we all know is, unless you're going to hand piece and hand quilt, then obviously you need a sewing machine. So I wanted to start with this machine because I guess a little story or a little bit of, you know, backstory as to how I began. My first machine I got at when my son was 9 months old, so about 20 years ago. And it was a Kenmore, and Kenmore was made by Janome. So today you can get a very similar machine, and they'll be Janome's. And it was a very more basic than this, and I started quilting on that Kenmore, and then I sold it and upgraded to this model of Kenmore. And I have kept this one. This is not my main machine. I do not use this one all the time. But this was what I started doing serious quilting on. So I tell you this so that you know that it doesn't take a machine that costs thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars with all the specialty stitches and the embroidery and all that, unless it's what you want and that's what you're looking for. But it doesn't take that to start your quilting journey. So even though I started quilting on my other machine, this was the one that I used for a very long time. And I made many, many quilts on this machine right here. Simple, very basic. It has a foot pedal, and it, you know, it was just basic in that it has 50 stitches. So when I was upgrading, that was a big deal. And I can honestly tell you, I've almost never used most of these. I've of course used buttonholes, and I've used some zigzag, and that's really it. So I just, as far as quilting goes, I don't need even all these fancy stitches. So I don't use this machine every day now, but when I did use it every day, I would piece on this machine. I had several different feet. If you'll hold on just a minute, I'll grab those. Right now, I have a particular foot on there. Pop it off. This foot is, it's a clear foot with a wider opening. See that? And this is the one I leave on there right now because most of the time when I use this, I'm pulling it out to zigzag the edge of my cross stitch linen, or I'll be zigzagging some pieces of batting together to make a larger piece. So this one stays on my machine right now. But in the past, when I was using it all the time, the foot that I most commonly left on when I was piecing was this super duper handy 1/4 inch foot. So you can see here it has a guide on the edge. That's hard to see. And that guide just really helps you maintain a good 1/4 inch seam. So I used that one all the time. It's called a 1/4 inch foot. And when I first started quilting, I only knew how to quilt straight lines. So I could what's called stitch in the ditch to quilt the quilt, or I could do crosshatch. But I learned real quick that I didn't enjoy that, and I didn't love the results, and I was hearing about something called free motion quilting. So before though, when I did crosshatch quilting or straight line quilting, I would use this walking foot for my machine. And what that did was it gave these feed dogs on the machine, the little teeth are what guide fabric through on a normal basis. But when you're quilting, you want feet on both the top and the bottom. And so this walking foot is what it's called, is used when you're doing straight line quilting, and it guides the layers of the quilt through at an even rate. for the most part. I never could get the results I wanted. So I started doing some research and learning about free motion quilting. And so for free motion quilting, I had bought a darning foot or an open toe foot, and this will, you know, bounce up and down, and it allows, this is when you actually don't use the teeth and you're moving the quilt underneath. But I'm getting ahead of myself. There'll be another whole set of videos for that. But really, any machine that kind of has these simple feet, an open foot for zigzag and some specialty stitches, a 1/4 inch foot, a walking foot would be an extra that you could buy. And most of the time, the free motion or open toe darning foot is also an extra that you could buy. But all that to say that I made many, many, many quilts on this machine. I pieced them, I free motion quilted on here, and it served me really, really well for a long time. And then I had an opportunity to upgrade. And I kind of, by that point, I'd done enough free motion quilting that I knew what I was looking for. And so I decided to make an upgrade. But I kept this machine because the machine that I now use all the time doesn't do any specialty stitches. So you can't zigzag, nothing. It does straight stitch, and then I have a way to do free motion quilting. And that's it. So I kept this one so that I could actually zigzag or make a buttonhole if I ever decide I need to do a buttonhole, which isn't very often. So again, basic, but it served me well. It served me really well, and this was a good little machine. So, you know, think about what you really want to do, and you don't always have to buy the most expensive machine. You can do it with something very practical. So now I'll show you my everyday machine that I use now. Okay, I'm back, and we've changed views yet again. So forgive the background that you don't normally see on my floss tubes and quilty tubes, but if you've been around for a while, you know that I'm also a mom of 5, and 2 are off to college. My second one's going for the first time this fall, and so I'm still homeschooling my youngest 3, and that's only part of the books. Actually, I can, oh my, they go on and on and on, and that's not all the books we own. But anyway, so a lot of books, and because I have 4 boys and 1 girl, we also have a lot of Legos. So that's what you're seeing in your background. So I'm sorry if this is an odd angle, but this is the best way for me to capture my sweet, wonderful machine that I love dearly. So while it's every maybe stitcher or quilter's dream to have their own sewing or stitching room, or both, for most of us that's not practical and not doable, especially if you still got kids at home. So as part of my story, when I started quilting 20 years ago, I had the same desk set up that I'd bought used for like $25 at a church sale, and I set it up in the corner of our master bedroom, and that is where I sewed and made quilts for a long time. I sewed and quilted in there. I had a small tabletop ironing board that sat on our bathroom counter, and that's where I ironed. And I had my cutting mat down on the kitchen island, and that's where I cut fabric. And so I don't know if I'm just determined, but to me, where there's a will, there's a way. And even the least ideal setup, you can still make a quilt. So even now, I still got kids at home. Can't turn any of the bedrooms into my sewing or quilting room just yet, because they keep coming back for vacations and things. But I have a corner of our big game room, and so most of the game room is school and books, as you saw, and toys. But that's slowly changing, and I absolutely love my little setup. I have plans to expand, but the way it is right now, I love it. It's fantastic. So again, not even your space has to be ideal and Pinterest picture perfect, right? Work with what you have. So this is my baby machine, and I love her very much. She also is a Janome. I had won a fancy kind of singer sewing machine in an auction that didn't work, and I took it to a man who fixes machines. This was a long time ago. I probably need to look up the date, but we've been in this, maybe it's been 10 years. I don't know, maybe not that long. Pause, because I'm going to look that up. Okay, I looked it up. It was April of 2012, so not even 10 years yet. A little over 9 years that I've had this machine. And I did a trade-in. The man gave me a good deal on it. I guess I had money to spend on it. But I knew what I wanted, and this kind of fell into my lap. And I don't have any thread on it right now because I took it off to show you in the next part of my video. But this is a Janome, a 1600P. I think some later models came out as Janome 1600PQ, but it's pretty much the same machine. It's very similar to some of the Jukis that are out there. I love my machine. I've never had to have it fixed. I'm not even a good girl. I don't oil it very often, and it is tough, and it's just a fabulous machine. So you can see there is nothing special in it. It is super heavy. I have to get my sons to move it for me because it is a workhorse heavy metal machine. So it's like that Janome I was showing you, there's a good bit of plastic on it. It's still a good machine. This is super, super heavy. And it came with this extension table, which I absolutely love. And so, other than its normal threading mechanisms on here, it has a needle up and needle down. This is for winding a bobbin, and this tells it how fast and slow you want it to go. And there, over here, is a stitch length and a reverse stitch, and that's it. It doesn't do any special stitches. Like I said, I cannot zigzag on it. But the reason I bought this was that I wanted something fast, and something that could handle anything I push through it. So really in my bag making, in piecing, anything, nothing is too much for this machine. Anything can go through it, anything can go under it. It is powerful, and I love that. It is also fast, which as I began to get better at my free motion quilting, I was realizing I needed a machine that could keep up with me moving the quilt. And so I was looking for something faster. So whereas, maybe many machines in the 800 stitches per minute range, is that right? Stitches per minute? Stitches per second, yeah. Anyway. This is 1600, so it goes really fast, and that's just perfect. I love it because I sew most of the time. Even when I'm piecing, I tend to stitch faster than maybe the average person, and then for free motion quilting, it's absolutely perfect. And so when I want a free motion quilt, pardon me, my little Lori Holt mat here. When I want a free motion quilt, there isn't, on this one does not have a switch to lower the feed dogs, so not to lower those teeth. So I attach a different plate that kind of covers the feed dogs so they don't grab the fabric. So I attach a different plate. And then again, like my other machine, I have what's called a darning foot, or a free motion quilting foot, and I use that. So those two pieces together make it possible for me to do free motion quilting. And then really this is just my straight stitch foot, and it's good for my 1/4 inch. I mark with washi tape my different stitch seam lines, and then when I'm project bag making, I have a zipper foot that I put on. But again, straight stitch, it's not a specialty stitch, it's just a different foot. I love this machine. I would fix it and fix it and fix it, thankfully. So it doesn't really have anything digital and computerized. I'm not sure I'm using the right words. Obviously, it's mechanical and has some electrical, obviously. But there's no push buttons or screens or anything to be fixed on here, so it's very basic and able to be fixed. And then, of course, if it died beyond repair, I would get another one in a heartbeat. I absolutely love it. It's nice for free motion quilting because it goes fast, but it also has a larger throat opening. This is called the throat of the machine. And so as you're free motion quilting, you're able to fit more of the quilt through the throat, and so that's really helpful. And I just love this machine. Is this essential to making a quilt? No. Like I said, I did many quilts on that other machine. Do I absolutely love this machine? Wouldn't trade it for anything? Yes. So there's where we start. That's our basic, and that is my story as far as sewing machines go. All right, moving on. So aside from fabric to make your quilt with, which is totally up to you and really depends on the pattern you want to make, and your sewing machine, there's a whole lot of other things out there that are available to quilters. And these are what I think are my favorites, and in my opinion are the essentials that I couldn't do without. And that over 20 years of quilting, I've learned that these are the things I can't do without, and a lot of it I can do without. So let's start back here. One thing that I love is, of course, a nice big cutting mat. And this is actually a Lori Holt one. I have my old one underneath my Olfa that you can get at Joann's or Hobby Lobby. This is the larger 36-inch Lori Holt mat, and I really love it. But a nice big cutting mat is an essential. I also have a smaller cutting mat. I don't use this one very often, but it's nice for travel or working away from your main sewing space, or when you're trimming smaller things. So a small one is fine. I think I started with a small one. I don't think I had a big one. That seems like a long time ago. So I would invest. Actually, if I said you needed something, I would go ahead and invest in one of the larger mats. It makes cutting yardage and fat quarters a whole lot easier, and you can get one at Joann's with a coupon or on a sale. So be on the lookout for that, because to me that's an essential. After that, if you're going to be cutting fabric, gone are the days, I guess, I don't know how people sew garments these days. I know when my mom taught me how to sew with the a Butterick or a McCall's or a Simplicity pattern, the thin little pattern paper, and you ironed it and laid it out on the fabric, and you cut with your scissors, and having super good scissors were really important. But in the quilter's world, I do have a decent pair of scissors, but they're not super good sewing scissors. So to me, as long as they're a nice size and they're new and didn't get used for paper and cutting through wire and stuff, just a basic pair of scissors is going to be good for quilting. But in the quilter's world, your main cutting tools are going to be your rotary cutters. So this is your standard 45 millimeter rotary cutter. This is an Olfa brand, and this is a Fiskars brand, and you can tell they're both shaped very differently. This one holds like this, so when I'm cutting, I'm holding like this. This one is a little bit different, and I mean it's basically the same, it's a little bit different feel. I like both of these. I don't remember which I started with, but I use these interchangeably. Like right now, I don't think I have any replacement blades for this one. I have replacements for this one. So when this one gets dull, I'll probably go back to using this one. This is a Fiskars. This is an Olfa. I like them both. There's a lot of rotary cutters out there. Find one that you like that works for you. Some of the Olfa ones are shaped like this, and they close and open automatically. Choose one. 45 millimeter. Get yourself some replacement blades to go with it. Oftentimes I order replacement blades off of Amazon. They can be a good deal cheaper. I will add a link for that below, as well as for these rotary cutters if I can find them. So pick one, see what you like. Is it okay to have two? It's okay to have two. I use them both. And then for cutting your fabric, you need rulers. Okay, that looks like a big stack, and I'm going to try and kind of narrow this down. And you can see I actually have another ruler here. I have other rulers up here, and I even have a couple under the table here that are bigger. And I use them, but you don't need all of those rulers to start your quilting journey. Okay, so what I have here to show you are the ones that I use almost every time I sit down to quilt. Okay, my first, I can't tell you what to buy first, but if I had to say which rulers are my most used, these first three are my most used quilting rulers. Quilting ruler number 1. Gotta have one. This is an Omni Grid. It is 6 inches wide. I think some of them are 6.5 now. Mine's an older one, but I haven't replaced it. I don't need it. I'm used to it. I know how it works. It's all good. The Omni Grid brand is my favorite, and it's 6 by 24. And this is useful for cutting my fat quarters or cutting yardage into strips. So I don't know where I would be if I didn't have this wonderful, great big ruler. And here's a little side tip. You can buy these little Sandpaper Dots at Joann's and other craft stores. And I've attached these to the back of most of my rulers, and that gives them a little extra. Even though this back side of the ruler is supposed to be textured and not slip, it still slips. And so I add these little Sandpaper Dots on the back of my rulers to help with that. So essential, 6 or 6.5 by 24. I use it all the time. It sits up here, back of my other one. The second ruler that I think is most necessary is this size. This is a 4 by 14, so about this size. You can, you know, hit or miss a couple inches or whatever. It's such a wonderful standard size ruler. This one I use all the time. All the time. Just could not do without it. Again, I have some dots on the back. This is the Omni Grid brand, and again, 4 by about 14. There's other ruler brands out there, and that's fine. Lori Holt makes excellent, excellent rulers. She makes bunches and bunches and bunches of size, so you might need to, if you're trying to, you know, save your pennies, you might need to choose the most usable ones. But I do love these Omni Grid, and they're really readily available at the local craft stores. So that was number 2. And then probably my third choice, if I could only maybe start with a few, would be this 6.5 inch ruler. And again, it's an Omni Grid. I think the first one, when I started, I had a 6 inch ruler and something happened to it. And then now it's a 6.5 inch ruler, which is much better. So I use this one all the time. So 6.5 inch square is super, super important. And so if I had to start with 3 to begin with, I think I would start with these 3 that I've just showed you. Now, after that, probably the next 2 I use the most are a 4.5 inch square. And this is also Omni Grid. It looks just a hair different. It's kind of a greenish. A 4.5, and then this is a 3.5 inch square. I use these all the time. So if you're trying to build your collection of rulers a little slower, you know, add on one at a time when you've got a little bit more money. I also have a 2.5 inch square, but I don't use it very often. For me, it's just almost too small. And so oftentimes I'll just use this for doing 2.5 inch squares, and you rotate your fabric and it works just fine. I don't feel like I need every single size. And I guess I can say this and that for 20 years I've probably worked with fewer than what I've just shown you. I didn't have these all this time. And then another one that's come in really handy is just a 1-inch ruler, and this is about 12 inches long. This is great for marking lines on when you're going to sew half square triangles and things like that. Not essential. There's other rulers you can use, but again, one that I do use all the time. I actually keep that one right here, and it's handy. And I keep all my rulers that I use all the time up on just kind of a little stand on this shelf above my cutting table. So after this, I'll show you a few more tools. All right, next on my list to show you is, I showed you the big orange handled scissors, and I kind of keep those over here. Next I'm going to show you, you need an iron. I know this sounds very rudimentary, but you need an iron. I have actually never spent the money on an expensive Oliso, or what's the other brand? I can't think of it. I have a really hard time spending $90 on an iron, and so I have not done that yet. And I've been through quite a few. I've had some that I've loved more than others. There was one that I loved very much. It was kind of old-timey looking. It was a great iron, and they don't make it anymore. So after my last one died, so over 20 years I've been through a lot of irons. After my last one died, I did some more research, because sometimes I felt like the irons I was buying weren't quite hot enough. I personally don't use steam in my quilting. I quilt dry, or I'll spray the fabric itself, but even that I do very rarely. So I happened upon this particular model on Amazon, and the ratings were fabulous. It got a little hotter, probably draws more volts of electricity, but this is a pure steam, 1700 watts, and I don't use the steam, but it is so far an excellent iron. So in my opinion, you're looking for a good heavy one, and you're looking for something that gets hot. And sometimes the $20 ones. I don't remember how much this one was. I will link this one below on Amazon. I don't remember exactly how much this one was, but it was well within my reasonableness, or I wouldn't have bought it. It's been a good iron so far. So you need a good hot iron. I talked about just a simple pair of larger fabric scissors, but probably more important to me than that are my snips. I keep these next to my sewing machine, and I don't know where I would be without these scissors. They are my go-tos. This is probably my second pair. I don't know what happened to the first pair. Did something too. Or somebody used them to cut something else and they had a snag. I don't know. They usually know to stay away. But these are great. Snipping threads, small corners. These are my go-tos, and they sit right next to my machine. So I'm going to put those back so I know where they are. And those are Fiskars, and I will link those below. I love those. Next thing, I've kind of, over 20 years, I've kind of run through a lot of different thread brands, and most have been great and have served me well. There were some that I built up a collection of cotton thread in lots and lots of different colors. Over time, I realized that I need very few colors. I tend to quilt in white. If I'm doing free motion quilting, it's almost always white, unless the quilt just doesn't lend itself to it. I'll do another neutral. But I rarely quilt in a color anymore. I still have colored threads. I got rid of a lot of them, but I still have a basic selection of colored threads that I use for other projects, or if I need a color. It's kind of a staple, but I don't have nearly as many as I used to. So I've been through different brands of threads that I've liked. Had one for a while that I really liked, and then I just felt like the quality had gone down, and my machine was not handling the thread well anymore, and so I finally took the plunge, and I resisted for a while because I felt like it was really expensive. But I finally made the switch to Aurifil threads. And you know Aurifil most of the time. This is a cone of white, because this is what I use every day, all the time. all my quilts really. And then you can get them on smaller spools, and you'll notice this orange, and for instance here's the black Aurifil, and this is the 50 weight. And you can buy these at most quilt shops. I don't remember if Joann's has Aurifil or not. But I buy these cones. I buy a cone. I think I buy a cone once a year, and with as much quilting as I do, usually once a year, never more than twice a year, I'll buy myself a new cone off of Amazon, and I feel like it's a good price. And I am now on the Aurifil thread lovers list. I really just the quality of thread that it is, I feel like it is worth what I pay for it. And so I use the white all the time. And then, like I said, I keep a couple of neutrals on hand. You can see I have and is this off-white? What do they call this one? They don't call it anything. Kind of an off-white or a creamy color, a gray and a black. And those are the ones I keep on hand most often. And if there's something really special, I'll buy a color for it. And then you'll have the spool forever. They last. It seems like to me Aurifil lasts longer. The spool of thread lasts longer. Maybe that's just my imagination. But I really love Aurifil thread. I am a convert, and I am here to stay. So I'll definitely link those cones below. All right, let's see. What's next? This may seem silly, but everybody needs a seam ripper, right? The little seam rippers that come with your machine are usually about this big, and you're working really hard to hold those little things while you pluck out those stitches. And it's actually really frustrating. And so I found this, I don't even remember who makes it. If I can link it, I'll find it. I like this seam ripper. It's ergonomic. I can hold it and really work at my stitches. I know that sounds silly, but I would buy this again if I needed to. It's just a seam ripper, but to me it's a big deal. I can really hold it, and it doesn't stress out my fingers. I'll link it below if I can find it. Okay, next essential is I don't use pin cushions for when I'm sewing, because really to me sticking pins in a pin cushion slows me down and it's a little cumbersome. So one of my favorite gadgets that they came out with, I don't know how long ago, but they've been around a little while now, are these magnetic pin bowls. And you can get them, Fat Quarters Shop has them, there's plenty of places that have them. They have a little rubber bottom. This one I think came from Fat Quarters Shop, and actually this one, there's another tutorial for you. I'll just start making these. This, you can buy this at Harbor Freight. This is like a metal, you put it on your tool chest. It magnetizes to your tool chest, and you put your stuff in it. I don't know, I don't have a tool chest. But I bought one at Harbor Freight for a really good price, and I spray painted it myself, and somebody made me a decal, and I put it on here, and I have a second pin bowl, so I made my own. But they're just so easy. I have two because I keep one by my machine, and I keep one up here on my cutting table. And you just toss your pins in them, and usually the magnet is so strong, you can toss pretty carelessly, and your pin's going to make it in the bowl. And I love these. I couldn't do without these. Okay, so then my favorite pins are these glass head pins, and they're long. So you can see, I can measure it for you here. They're about from where the bowl ends, the head of the pin ends, to the, tip. It's about 1 3/4 inches long. So they are long glass head pins. And if I can find those, I'll link them for you too. I'm just keep saying that, but really, look below. I love these long pins for pinning seams, which I don't do all that often. But anyway, you need pins. And then I have my 2 pin bowls because, oftentimes I'm pinning seams or things, pinning blocks together up here on this countertop. And so I have this one over here that I'm pulling pins from. But when I come over here to sit down and stitch or sew, as I'm pulling out pins, I have another one over here to catch my. I love all things vintage. You can probably tell from looking around, I love using vintage items to store odds and ends. So this is a vintage Jello mold, and I use it to store another thing that I really love, which are my Clover Wonder Clips. I use it at Joann's or on Amazon, and I use these all the time. A lot of people use them to hold their binding, and when they hand bind, I don't hand bind for the most part. And so, but I use these for all kinds of things. I use them in my bag making. I use them just holding different things together. They are forever. All right, just a couple more things. Another vintage mold. There is a product out there, I think that it's So Emma, in fact, Quarter Shop produces, called Alphabetties, and they're especially useful if you get into making Lori Holt's piece blocks, say from Farm Girl Vintage or Farm Girl Vintage 2 or the Vintage Christmas. And they're simply little tiles that you can buy them, called Alphabetties, and they have all the letters on of the alphabet on them. I didn't want to spend the money on Alphabetties, and so I made my own. I cut cardstock into squares. So they're 1-inch square cardstock that I cut with my paper trimmer. I used a Sharpie and wrote the letters of the alphabet on them, and I keep them sorted on my shelf in my little mold, and I use them when I'm doing Lori Holt blocks. So again, I made my own. Can you buy the ones that exist if you don't want to make your own? Yes. Do you need them to make any quilt? No. They're very helpful for when you're making Lori Holt's quilts. Probably last but not least, if you're ready to pin and quilt your own quilts, I hope to have a video coming out soon that explains some of the process for pinning and quilting your own quilts at home. I'll have that in the future. But if you're ready to get pinning your own quilt, this is a cute little container that many years ago a Jelly Roll came in. You can purchase these probably on Amazon, but I bought mine at Joann's. These are these curved pins. They've got a little bend in them, safety pins, and I use these to pin my the layers of my quilts together. The batting, the fabric, the top of the quilt, the back of the quilt, the batting, and the top quilt that I pieced. And I pin those, and I'll show you in the video that I do about that, about how I pin and how far apart I pin. But those are a quilting essential, especially if you're not going to quilt your own quilts, then you don't need to worry about it. But then if you want to quilt your own, then having a nice, especially for a big quilt, having a nice amount of those pins will take you a long way. So I think that's all I wanted to share with you today. I hope this has been helpful, giving you some inspiration to get started on your quilting journey and gathering your supplies and what you need, maybe what you don't need. Pick and choose, making good choices with the money you have available. I know I don't have unlimited funds. I wish I did. Sometimes I shop like I have unlimited funds, but I don't. So definitely check below to see what kind of links I've added down below, and feel free to ask me any questions in the comments. I love getting your comments. You can also email me. My email is below. You can follow me on Instagram at Celeste Creates. And I would love it if you would like this video and subscribe and tell me what you think. So with that, I leave you, and I hope you have a really blessed day, and happy quilting, happy stitching, all the fun things, and stay cool.